on TikTok for TikTok Tuesday TikTok Talks. Anyone's on yet? Are you on yet? Can you see me? Do you hear me? Hello. How are you? How are y'all? So I'm just on here talking and chatting, talking about colorism, of course, since this is colorism healing. Hopefully answering some questions, asking you all some questions. Where are y'all from? Who are y'all? Let me know where you watching from. Have you heard of colorism? Do you actually follow my page, or did you just click on the first live video you saw? Country, welder, Adam, Robin. So I am Sarah. I'm Sarah of Colorism Healing, and I'm doing these Tuesday TikTok talks at 2 o'clock Central Standard Time every week to talk about various topics dealing with colorism, ways to address it, mainly ways to address it, ways that we can deal with it. So if you're on, let me know where you're tuning in from. I don't really know who people are on TikTok. Facebook, Instagram, I know those people usually in real life, but TikTok, we have a bunch of friendly strangers who watch and comment and like, and I love it, but I also want to get to know y'all better. One of the things that I wanted to talk about today was the video, the duet I did with 50 Shades of Shay, and she was talking about intersectional privilege. She was having an intersectional conversation about privilege, so cross-cultural conversation about privilege at that. So that's kind of what has been on my mind the past few days, and that was during the blackout, of course, right? So if you are familiar with the blackout, we got a lot of support from allies, so that was a perfect duet for that. Hey y'all, welcome. Again, I'm Sarah. I started Colorism Healing way back in 2013 before anyone had ever heard of TikTok. And I am currently a writing professor, so a lot of what I do when it comes to colorism healing has to do with writing and creativity. Just wrapped up an international writing contest. Do we have any writers on board? If so, you should consider entering the contest next year. It's closed now, but we will have a live book launch on YouTube when the book comes out. So all the authors who participated in the contest will get to read some of their work. They'll get to talk about their experiences with colorism, why they wanted to participate in the contest, why they wanted to join the movement to address colorism, right? And it is a multicultural conversation. So the contest pulls in people from Canada, India. We've had contestants as far apart as California and Australia, right? So that's one thing I love about it. It is a lot of women. A lot of the contestants tend to be young women, teenagers, which I think is very telling, right, of who has been vocal in speaking out about the issue of colorism in particular. So if any of you all have other questions for me regarding colorism or the work that I do, please let me know. But I will define it really quickly if you haven't heard of it. Colorism is the prejudice or the preference, right, of a particular skin tone, particularly within people of the same race, but it could also be interracial, so across races. And across the world, in many different cultures, there is a preference or privileging of lighter skin tones and more white or Eurocentric features like hair textures and noses and eye colors, right? And the history of that can vary from region to region, but a lot of it is based in colonialism. A lot of it is based in like global anti-blackness, right? And white supremacy and mass media, right? The spread of that through Hollywood or through Bollywood or through Nollywood, right? And I, of course, have experienced it growing up as a dark-skinned African-American woman, but it wasn't something I really talked about. It wasn't something I felt like I could talk about. In my community, it was very taboo to say that you felt some type of way about what people said or how people treated you because of your skin tone or your features. But then I started teaching high school, and people, my students, they were saying things like, I'm less proud of myself because I got dark over the summer, or I don't really like this picture because I look too black on here, or they'd say, I don't really like dark skinned people when I first meet them, right? And so this thing that I thought was just maybe just me being too sensitive, or something that was in the past that had died with my generation, I saw very clearly that it was still alive and well among teenagers, among young people. And so that's when I started Colorism Healing, right? So when I started blogging about colorism, sharing my experiences, doing research on it, right? Started the website and the blog, started posting videos. Hey, everybody who's tuning in, how are you? So I'm open to taking questions too. Right now I'm just talking. I'm doing good, Fortnite addict. Just chilling. I'm down here in Texas. I live in Illinois, but I'm been quarantined here in Texas with family for the last month, like almost a month. It'll be a month on the 1st. Also, my birthday's coming up. I'm a Gemini. Shout out to any other Geminis if y'all are watching. Happy birthday to y'all. I'm a June Gemini, like right smack dab in the middle of Gemini season. So I'm excited about that. Maybe y'all can guess how old I'll be. But for those of you who are just joining, I'm Sarah, right, of Colorism Healing, as you can see from the tag. So I was just talking about why I do the work that I do, why I started this project, this mission. A lot of it stemming from my personal experiences, but also seeing other people that I cared about, other students, dealing with the issue, getting down on themselves for their skin tone. And the more I've done this work, the more I see the importance for doing it, right? The more I see and hear from people who are very different from me, have very different cultures, speak different languages, right? Are different skin tones, have different hair textures, but they all have something to say about colors, and they all have some story to tell, right? I'm also curious to know, like, more about who's watching, right? So if you have experienced colorism, right? If you know what that is, maybe you have an unpopular opinion on it. I really want to know more about the folks on TikTok, because I don't know y'all like I know the folks on Instagram and Facebook. I joined TikTok back in January and it's like one of my favorite apps, of course. And I've gone live once before. I think it's like my second live, right? But like I love the comments. Of course, I love the videos themselves, but I just love the supportiveness in the TikTok community, and how so many of like people of all ages and ethnicities are woke in a way that wasn't true back when I was growing up. So it's been a delight. And I think that makes it a good place to talk about something like colorism. The fact that people are open-minded, right? Then of course we all know they got the other side of TikTok that is very, very problematic. Bear in the jar. Hey, I remember you from last week. You said I am white and have never experienced colorism. I'm here to listen and learn. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. See, I would not have known just from your username that you were white and that you had never experienced colorism. It's interesting. I have had people who identify as white express parallel issues when it comes to colorism, right? Even thinking about like preferences for blonde hair and blue eyes over being more olive toned or having like darker hair and darker eyes. And then even within like European countries, there are different ethnic differences, right? Where there's discrimination or preferences between different European ethnicities, right? And I think that's also something to point out too, is that white people have ethnicity too. But it's more obvious in communities of color because we do have a wider range of physical appearances, right? So even within one race, right, like the black race or the African American ethnicity, right, you have people who look white. They have skin that's just as white as anybody else's. They have super straight hair, but they still are part of the category of black. And then you have every other shade from that, right? So colorism is really, really obvious in communities of color because of that. Um, so user says they experience it between siblings. Absolutely. So siblings, right, within a family can be very different skin tones or have very different hair textures, right? I talk with my sister all the time, who's several shades lighter than me, so I can relate to that. My sister herself is not colorist, right? She doesn't like enforce colorism. My parents didn't, but other people would. Like friends would come and visit, and they'd say, "Oh, your sister's so pretty," and they wouldn't have a compliment to give to me at all, right? Or I was the mean one, and she was like homecoming queen, class president, like super popular, right? Especially if the siblings are the same gender, right? It becomes even more obvious, I think, if the siblings are the same gender, because there's more room for comparison there. So definitely. Um, and actually, on tomorrow, my sister's gonna come on. No, not tomorrow. Next week on the 10th, I do live workshops on Wednesdays too. So she's gonna come on and talk about being an ally, right? Like as the lighter skinned sister with lighter colored eyes. She talks a lot about supporting me as a sister, but also just darker women in general in terms of not accepting the attention that she gets, not laughing at the jokes, right? Not accepting the compliments that are based on her skin tone, right? Instead of her character. So I think that'll be a fun discussion to have. So yes, that did hurt. Absolutely, it definitely hurt. Oh my gosh, it used to hurt so bad. Then when I was 5, I always talk about this like origin story that I have. That when I was 5, and I don't even remember saying this, but my mom, when I started writing about colorism, my mom told me that when I was 5, some of my aunts, like extended family, were saying my sister's so pretty, she's gonna break some hearts one day, you're gonna have to like pay special attention to her because she's gonna be a heartbreaker. And my mom heard me whisper under my breath that that's because she's light skinned, right? And I was only 5, so I imagine I had seen so much attention and like praise and affirmation that my sister had gotten that I never got, right? Even at 5 years old, I was able to see that, right? And I know at 5 that hurt me a lot, because even as I was getting older, going into teenage years, I was still triggered by that kind of thing. Diana Joy says, I never would have considered blondes have more fun as a form of colorism. Yeah, so it's not colorism per se. I was using that as an analogy. So because it's not just that blondes have more fun, but if we think more historically, right, the Aryan race, right, even more evil, I guess, like Nazism. And so even among white people, right, like the Germans versus the Jews, there is a kind of discrimination where there's an idealized look, right? The idealized look might be the Aryan features. They're seen as a superior race, even amongst people who are considered European or white. So yeah, I was just using that as an analogy to maybe help you understand like how there are standards of beauty, even that some white people don't meet standards of beauty in their community, right? Because maybe they're not blonde enough, right? Or other beauty standards related to physical appearance, like even freckles, right? I hear a lot of white women talk about having freckles as a form of complexion that is seen as shunned, right, or looked down upon. I wouldn't say it's the same thing as colorism, but it's a starting point or maybe a connection point to help people who are not of color understand how communities of color think about complexion. So there you go. You said it. You said it's a great metaphor to help my other learning white allies. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's definitely a metaphor. I love your attention to children's books. Absolutely, yeah, I love it. And it's the educator in me too. I also have a niece and nephew here, and I've been hanging out with them while I've been in Texas. So it's been on the forefront of my mind. But I think because I was 5 when I recognized colorism. I know also research says that it starts young, it starts really early. Our perceptions about our own appearance and our perceptions about other people's appearance. Um, I hear even other 5-year-olds complain about being darker, right? Or they complain about their hair, right? So the sooner we can instill that self confidence, the sooner we can instill that self esteem, the better, right? But also, when I was in kindergarten, someone called me the N word. One of my classmates called me the N word, right? So starting young is not just about um, helping us gain self-esteem. Starting young is also about helping us not be prejudiced and helping us not be racist, helping us not be colorist. Because again, my classmate who was also 5, maybe 6, had heard someone else use that word, right? So we can work with children as young as we can to undo some of that social conditioning. So that's why I think children's books are so great. And also, I'm an English professor. So books, writing, literacy, I taught high school English. I teach like college English now. So I just love books. I hate capitalism. I think it's really important to recognize the connection between colorism and racism. Absolutely. You can say more about that too. So I'm happy to read your comments for everyone else. But the connection between colorism and racism, it's an interesting thing because in some ways, racism spawned from colorism, right? Because I always say race is a social construct, right? So we made up racial categories, but we did not make up skin tone. We did not make up hair texture. Human beings did not invent eye color, right? We decided to put labels on people because they were from a different region or because they spoke a different language or because their skin tone was different, right? And then what is whiteness, right? It's a concept, right? It's not a tangible thing. Like my hair is tangible. You can feel and see that my hair texture is different, but the idea of being black or the idea of being white is not like an actual thing. It's a concept. And colorism is part of the need to define whiteness in a way that made it powerful and superior above all things that were not white. And if you look at like the history of immigration laws when our country, the United States, was first being founded, right? Like the people who were writing the laws were actually on paper choosing who they would classify as white and who they wouldn't, right? Who would be considered black. Like they were making these decisions based on what most benefited them, right? Or whatever their biases were at the time. Like they were literally like debating like, would people coming from Asia be considered white or would they be considered black, right? So race is so convoluted, like it really is not a rational system. It really isn't. That's why it falters every time when you think about racist logic. And even like the one drop rule. So when we talk about colorism, we talk about the one drop rule, which was a rule instilled during the time of slavery in the United States. And the only reason why they came up with that rule were a couple of reasons. One, again, is to make white be pure, right? So white is so pure that only one drop of African blood will taint it and you're black forever. That's kind of like the premise behind the theory, right? Because white has to be pure, right? But black can be anything. Anything can be black. But also, more importantly, or just as importantly, like the one drop rule gave white slaveholders more people to enslave. So if you can make more people classified as black, then that gave you more people to use and exploit for free labor. Because if those people were classified as Native American, if they were classified as some other ethnic group, then they legally could not be enslaved, right? And I even saw a recent Instagram post about some Native American and indigenous tribes being classified as black on census so that slaveholders could keep them enslaved, so that they could legally keep them enslaved. So it's the logic of racism is a trip. It's a mess. It's a hot mess, and it doesn't um, it's not apparent how um, false it is or how it benefits certain people, right? Even when we say people vote against their interests, people who are voting because a candidate, a president, is racist, even if he doesn't support their class status, they're still voting in the interest of maintaining whiteness at the top of the hierarchy. But I mean, there's only so much I can say on the live. I want to see what other people are saying. Zen Claff says, I have been making videos on skin lightening and skin brightening. I would love to see those. Can you tag me in them? I hope you're still watching. If not, maybe I can send you a message. Yeah, can you send me those? I would love to watch your videos. Sorry, I misspelled those. But I would love to watch your videos on skin lightening. Lots of pushback from beauty gurus. People insist that it's just a beauty treatment. Absolutely, yeah. When I was in kindergarten, I asked where all the black kids were. That's cool, Bear in a Jar. So that must mean that outside of school, you saw a lot of black kids, right? So for you to have the expectation that you would see black kids in kindergarten, that must mean you saw them elsewhere. So that's cool. I think that's a good thing for parents and like mentors and caregivers to keep in mind, is to make sure kids are exposed to diversity as much as possible. I would assume that colorism evolved from racism. Yeah. Name and value, skin tone, and physical appearance. I've said to people, race is a social concept, like you pay checks, like your paychecks. We value some things more. Oh, absolutely. I think that's a good point. And all work should be valued the same. Yeah, so when people say like race is a social construct, sometimes they say it to mean that race is not important, right? But it's just like with your paycheck, even though it's a social construct, people still use it to get things. People still use it to benefit them. And so people use their race in the same way. We can use race, racial privilege, racial capital, just like financial capital. We can use our racial capital to get certain things in life, right? Or to avoid certain things or to get access to certain things. It was more explicit back in the day, so to speak. During slavery, for example, it was more explicit that you could use your race to get certain things, but it still happens even now. Oh, yeah, you're still here. Yeah, so tag me in your videos. If they're on TikTok, I would love to see them, comment on them, maybe duet some. Bear in a Jar says, it's like a tangled necklace chain. It is. It's really hard to undo it. I'm grateful for having an open conversation so we can unite it. Absolutely. So keep in mind that I do this every Tuesday. For now, I'm just keeping them like around 15 minutes, although it's been like 20 minutes now. I love answering questions and responding to your comments the most. I think your comments and questions were great today. But I'm going to sign off now and get back to blogging and doing other work. Don't forget that on June 26th at noon Central Standard Time, we're doing a live book launch, but that'll be on YouTube. So I'll have authors on reading and talking about colorism as well. But thank y'all for the great conversation and the comments and feedback and all that. See y'all next week. Bye. Woohoo! Hey, pretty girl, I like your hair.